Harry Kane broke records, scored hundreds of goals, and wore the England captain's armband for more than 10 years. He was one of the most feared attackers of his period because he was a great craftsman in a sport that is frequently characterized by explosive prodigies. He methodically destroyed defenses with a clinical accuracy. However, a startling paradox preceded his legacy. He was a man who accumulated almost every individual award a striker could possibly hope for, but he was frequently had to watch rivals win the group awards he so desperately wanted. To finally receive the team distinction that had escaped him for so long, he had to leave the club of his youth, move to a foreign league, and wait until he was 31 years old. This is the realistic, arduous tale of how an 8-year-old boy who was rejected developed a strong enough mind to endure the lowest points of professional sports and win the grand prize. Please leave a like to remember a captain who never learned how to give up before we reveal the cost he paid. The surety typically associated with a future star was not present at the start of Harry Kane's journey. Music. Harry Edward Kane was born in London on July 28, 1993, and grew up in Chingford, East London, in a household that valued football as a pastime long before it turned into a career. He joined Arsenal's development system at the age of 8, when coaches had to make snap decisions regarding kids whose bodies and skills were still growing. Kane did not look like the explosive prospect that many scouts thought would go swiftly. Years later, former Academy director Liam Brady admitted that Arsenal had thought he was a little overweight and unathletic before acknowledging that it had been a mistake to release him. Given the player Kane finally developed into, those words sound nearly unfathomable. However, at the time, these were the conclusion of experts who had examined a very young boy. Later on, Kane acknowledged that he was probably too young to properly comprehend the significance of the rejection. There was no grandiose pledge to disprove Arsenal. His father, Pat Music, responded in a more significant way by refusing to let disappointment develop into rage. Kane recalled strolling toward the park behind the family's house, a plain patch of grass where he used 2 trees as temporary posts to play with his father and brother. "Don't worry, Harry, we'll work harder and we'll go on and we'll find another club," Pat replied, putting an arm around his son. The family had a useful next step after reading that sentence. Although Arsenal's decision was devastating, it didn't have to be the last word on Kane's future. His father didn't look for someone to blame. He put his attention back on his work. Kane subsequently said that Pat didn't put any pressure on him and frequently responded to setbacks with the straightforward statement, "Well, let's get on with it then." However, that mindset did not instantly turn an 8-year-old into a top striker. It provided a more stable lesson. It is possible to take disappointment seriously without treating it as irreversible. It was not necessary for one academy's evaluation to specify the boundaries of his capabilities. At 8 years old, Kane had little control over how scouts perceived his body, but once their assessment was made, he could choose whether or not to continue playing. Music. Throughout his career, such differentiation emerged as a recurrent pattern. The family did not act as though a door had stayed open when it closed. They accepted the outcome, looked for another chance, and went on. Music. Kane went back to playing grassroots football with Ridgeway Rovers, where kids, families, volunteer coaches, weekend games, and frequent ball touch were more important than expert forecasts. The years that followed were not a secret montage where future greatness was exposed at every turn. Matches, training sessions, errors, physical development, and repetition all contributed to their slow education. Outrunning every defender was not a prerequisite for his eventual intelligence as a striker. It developed as a result of watching movement, identifying space, honing his initial touch, and figuring out where the next stage of play was going to take place. An early academy examination could not provide the time needed to develop those qualities. The boy whose song was published by Arsenal had not yet reached adulthood or finished his football schooling. It is not appropriate to romanticize rejection as being painless. However, Kane later admitted that it gave him more motivation and left him with a challenge. Music. He didn't base his public persona on resentment whenever he faced Arsenal. However, he never forgot the verdict. He turned it into fuel for competition. Years later, when his career was on the verge of being reduced to a single letdown due to injuries, challenging loan stints, lost finals, and public criticism, Kane constantly went back to the approach that his father had initially demonstrated in that Chingford Park. An assessment may be incorrect, and a result may be harmful. The following course of events was not decided by either. Unquestionably, landing a professional contract at Tottenham Hotspur was a victory, but it also thrust him into the harsh, incredibly unglamorous realities of the English football pyramid, a structure that brutally divides the strong from the weak. Unproven youngsters are rarely given starting roles by Premier League teams. Instead, they are sent on loan to lower leagues to test their mental and physical toughness against adult men struggling to make ends meet. When Kane, then 17 years old, was loaned to Leyton Orient in the 3rd Division of English football in January 2011, he made his senior professional debut against Rodale in a stadium that seemed so different from the immaculate facilities of the Premier League. By the time he was 18, he was competing in the Championship in the gritty, notoriously unfriendly Millwall, where he had to help a struggling side fend off the scary possibility of relegation in front of one of the nation's most demanding fan bases. These weren't glamorous tasks performed on immaculately kept fields. Young, highly anticipated prospects from top-tier Misme encounter challenges delivered with a physical intensity they have never encountered before in the extremely tough and physically demanding lower divisions of English football, where seasoned players rely on intimidation. In the end, he won Millwall's Young Player of the Season title by demonstrating that he was not afraid of the physical combat after absorbing the heavy hits and learning how to utilize his body to cover the ball against aggressive, fully developed centre-backs. But after a disappointing injury-plagued tenure at Norwich City, which was completely halted by a painful broken metatarsal bone in his foot, Music encountered a huge, almost insurmountable obstacle during a subsequent loan at Leicester City. As he found himself more and more restricted to the squad's periphery while playing in the Championship, the momentum he had painstakingly generated over the preceding years seemed to vanish. Under manager Nigel Pearson, he was relegated to the cold substitute bench for weeks, watching helplessly from the sidelines as other strikers were selected to lead the line. He struggled to get even a few minutes of meaningful playing time, and he felt his dream fading with each game day. Later on, he freely acknowledged that the lowest point of his career, a time of intense, oppressive uncertainty, was sitting by himself in his hardly equipped flat during the Leicester loan. He was so overcome by the excruciating lack of progress and the pure loneliness that he genuinely thought of abandoning the trip completely. Informing his father over the phone that he wanted to end the loan spell and go back to London, his father merely advised him to keep working, stay focused on the process, meet the music, and have faith that all will work out in the end. It was the same calm, unshakable voice that had led him years before in the park. He came into the Brady Six, a television documentary about Tom Brady music that traces the career of an athlete, Music who was notably passed over by almost every team. During this particular time of intense professional uneasiness, he saw the tale of an American quarterback who was infamously passed over in the 2000 NFL Draft due to scouts' serious concerns about his lackluster body form, sluggish running speed, and physical athleticism. The similarities were so strong that he became acutely aware of how the renowned quarterback's experience of being totally undervalued was a direct reflection of his own difficulties in the English football system. It provided tangible proof that an underappreciated athlete could nonetheless outlive scouts' assessments thanks to exceptional processing speed and an unwavering work ethic, serving as a significant psychological anchor. The documentary gave him the precise attitude shift he required, demonstrating that early rejection was not a final verdict as long as the covert planning continued behind closed doors. Music. When he got back to London, his resolve had entirely changed, and he was prepared to fight for his position no matter what. When Tim Sherwood's management changes at Tottenham, followed by the revolutionary arrival of Mauricio Pochettino, finally gave him fleeting chances in little cup matches and late substitutes, he grasped them with unquestionable desperation. Music. Until those infrequent appearances gradually became regular Premier League starts, he sprinted down blind alleys, constantly pressed opposition defenders until his lungs ached, and battled for every loose ball. Music. The floodgates officially opened, and a phenomenon began when a deflected free kick against Aston Villa finally struck the back of the net in late 2014 to secure He refused to fit into the conventional one-dimensional role of a penalty box poacher. Therefore, becoming a top goal scorer was just the beginning of his incredible tactical development. He drastically changed his playing approach over the ensuing seasons to become his team's brains. He started dropping deep into the midfield areas, functioning almost like a traditional quarterback to receive the ball under pressure, turn and launch long sweeping diagonal passes that unlocked opposing defenses with devastating accuracy. He did this by fusing the finishing instincts of a classic number 9 with the creative vision of an elite number 10. In addition to creating one of the most deadly attacking duos in Premier League history, this tactical intelligence enabled him to win 3 Premier League Golden Boots and the Top Scorer Award Music at the 2018 World Cup in Russia. But amid his evident individual genius, a nasty and extremely irritating pattern started to emerge, clouding his own achievements for a long time. Every score record he broke and every milestone he accomplished was accompanied by a collective failure at the very end, a devastating near miss that kept him from winning the trophy his skills so obviously deserved. No matter how well he performed on a weekly basis, the near misses began to pile up like heavy weights on his shoulders, creating an unavoidable media narrative that was impossible to ignore. The 2015 League Cup final loss to Chelsea was readily written off at the time as a youthful learning experience for a young team who presumably had plenty of time to win further titles. He rushed back from a serious ankle ligament injury to start the 2019 Champions League final against Liverpool in Madrid at the age of 25, pushing his body to the limit. However, after giving up an excruciatingly early penalty, he suffered a harsh 200 defeat on the highest stage of club football. 2 years later, in the 2021 Carabao Cup final against Manchester City, the stakes were even higher. Only a few days after his manager Jose Mourinho was abruptly fired, the game was played amid pandemonium. A few months later, at the age of 27, he led England in the Euro 2020 final at Wembley Stadium, in front of a fervently anticipating home country music that had been waiting more than 50 years for an international trophy. He was left to stroll solemnly past the shining silver trophy while attempting to digest a deep national anguish that reverberated throughout the entire nation after the match concluded in a devastating penalty shootout, lost to Italy after securing an early lead that threw the nation into full delight. By the time he was 30, the story of his empty trophy cabinet had grown to be a burdensome, ongoing burden, a topic of discussion in every pundit argument and interview. Music. He valiantly led England to victory over Spain in the Euro 2024 final in Berlin, which was yet another enormous opportunity to dispel any misgivings and ultimately ensure his legacy with a significant international honor. He was controversially substituted off in the second half, and the team lost 2-1 in the last moments once more. He had to face the heartbreaking reality of being 90 minutes away from glory once more, wondering if the universe was just playing a cruel trick. He was forced to watch the final, crucial minutes from the sidelines, standing on the pitch, watching another group of men celebrate wildly amid the falling confetti. Because elite sports are inherently cruel, losing 5 big finals on a worldwide scale can easily crush a competitor's spirit, foster deep toxic cynicism, or lead a top player to become enraged and attack their teammates and managers. He led by example in every training session, upholding his demanding daily preparation standards and absorbing the constant media attention without once breaking rank. He repeatedly demanded the ball in the most trying situations and accepted the tremendous strain of leading the line for both club and country. By doing this, he demonstrated to the public that despite the trophy's music that continuously eluded him, his character, professional integrity, and dedication to his work remained intact. On December 10, 2022, under the lights of Al Bayt Stadium in Qatar, Harry Kane experienced one of the lowest points of his professional career. He took the field as England's captain against the reigning world champions, France, at the age of 29, bearing the well-known burden that comes with every generation asked to put an end to the nation's protracted wait music for another World Cup. Although England had played bravely, they were behind 2-1 as the game came to a close. The referee then indicated the spot after Mason Mount was fouled inside the penalty area. That night, Kane had already scored once from 12 yards out, and Music had earlier scored by driving his penalty beyond Hugo Lloris to tie the score for England. Music. He had to confront the same goalie once more. Lloris was more than just the captain of France. For almost 11 years, he had been Kane's teammate at Tottenham. Each man had a peculiar familiarity with the other due to years of common training. However, Kane later denied that his preparation had changed as a result of the first penalty or his friendship with Lloris. He clarified that he always prepared for the potential of receiving 1 or 2 penalties in a single game and already knew what he was going to do. The lack of a plan was not the issue. It was the performance of a move he had done numerous times with success. Kane put the ball on the spot, Music took a step back, and performed the routine that had made him one of the most dependable penalty takers in football. Music. Despite his powerful blow, the ball kept rising, going over the crossbar and into the spectators. Music. For an instant, the motion surrounding him appeared to detach from the silence of his own response. Kane leaned forward, put his hands on his knees, and pulled the front of his shirt toward his face. France was still in the lead. Music. The chance vanished in an instant. But the realization of its significance came as soon as the final whistle announced England's 2-1 loss. A large portion of the world's perception of the entire game was shaped by the missed penalty. However, Kane did not look for a way to lessen his accountability. Speaking afterwards, he recognized that big games are frequently determined by minute details, but stated England had produced the better opportunities throughout key parts of the game. Without hiding the error, he explained the second penalty. That night, it was only the execution. Music. He claimed that although the second effort had failed, the first had been hit as intended. Lloris was not accused of anything. The referee, music, the state of the field, or the tension at the time. Kane realized that a World Cup does not come around again the next year. It would take 4 years to get another shot, and some of the players who are leaving Qatar might never get another one. He acknowledged that everyone would be affected by the loss and stated he would accept it as captain. That reaction did not make the miss seem heroic, nor did it make the repercussions go away. Its restraint gave it significance. Kane didn't beg people to ignore what had transpired. He acknowledged that he had failed to provide England with one more successful strike on the night they needed it, and distinguished between preparation and execution. Music. He also spoke about his pride in the players and the belief they had carried throughout the tournament, refusing to let the error reflect poorly on the rest of the team. Being a leader in such a situation did not entail downplaying the suffering. It meant facing the outcome, clearly identifying the mistake, and acknowledging that the captain's armband was still his even in the absence of a triumph to rejoice over. When Kane left Qatar, the gravity of the situation did not go away. He acknowledged a few weeks later that he would likely remember the missed penalty for the rest of his life. Music. He didn't try to minimize it to a common error or assert that he had already forgotten the suffering. He stressed that it would not be permitted to alter him as a person or as a player, but it would stay with him. The same approach that had gotten him through rejection, challenging loan periods, injuries, and losing finals would be his music response. Go back to work and go on. England's first post-World Cup game took place in Naples on March 23, 2023 against Italy. Kane stood over a penalty once more. The possibility of another mistake could not be controlled, and the memory of Qatar had not been erased. Nevertheless, he accepted the kick. This time, Music scored his 54th goal for England, surpassing Wayne Rooney as the country's all-time top scorer. The goal did not get England back into the competition or change the outcome of the World Cup quarterfinal. It provided something more truthful. Although the penalty in Qatar was still one of Kane's most agonizing experiences, it was not allowed to become his last identity from 12 yards. 3 months after covering his face with his shirt under Al Bayt Stadium's lights, Music he faced another goalie, took on the same duty, and scored once more. He would never forget the miss. So would the choice to go back. It takes a life that goes beyond the confines of the game to navigate the strain of top football, when millions of people can study every significant touch. Music. Harry Kane's friendship with Katie Goodland, whom he met while growing up in East London, has been one of the longest and most obvious ties to that past existence. Long before big contracts, endorsement deals, international competitions, and the everyday scrutiny that would later surround his profession, they went to Chingford Foundation School together. A young Kane and Katie are seen. He had been the subject of transfer rumours for a few of summers, most notably with Manchester City's interest in 2021, but Tottenham had kept control of his contract and refused to lose their most valued player. The circumstances had shifted by the summer of 2023. Tottenham risked losing Kane without paying a transfer fee, while Bayern Munich provided consistent challenge for both domestic crowns and the Champions League. The year after that. As a result, there were multiple conflicting realities in the choice. Kane's devotion to the club, Tottenham's financial condition, music Bayern's drive to sign an exceptional striker, and the limited number of seasons remaining in which Kane might hope to perform near his physical peak. It is not necessary to assert that he thought his Tottenham career was unfinished or marked with an asterisk. His accomplishments were already evident in his public record. The relocation was a more straightforward professional decision. Music. He wanted to put himself to the test abroad and join a team that was supposed to contend for significant awards each season. After protracted discussions, Kane completed his transfer to Bayern Munich Music on August 12, 2023, leaving the only senior team he had ever played for permanently. He had to trade familiarity for uncertainty in order to make the move. He was aware of the league, the stadium, the music fans, and the expectations that surrounded him in North London. He moved to Munich, where he encountered a new language, a different football culture, music, and a team that viewed domestic victory as a regular duty rather than a far-off dream. The first reminder of that pressure, music, arrived right away. Kane came off the bench in Bayern's 3-0 loss to RB Leipzig in the German Super Cup on the day his signing was revealed. Although the loss prevented him from getting off to the convenient start that many had anticipated, it did not indicate that the move had been incorrect. In part, he had left Tottenham to get closer to team honours. However, another opponent raised a trophy to cap off his first night of German football. The decision had greater significance because of this conflict. Kane hadn't taken any action to ensure success. There is no such assurance in professional sports. He had moved into a setting where he would always have the chance to compete for prizes, and he had come to terms with the fact that every setback would now be evaluated in light of his decision to leave home. His commitment to Tottenham was unaffected by the move, nor did his record suffer. It signified the point at which allegiance could no longer keep him from exploring the possibilities of a different course. Harry Kane had a physical history that went beyond goals and appearances after playing at the top level of football for more than 10 years. Centre forwards must be able to accelerate frequently, change direction quickly, make contact with strong opponents, and be ready to challenge for the ball while their bodies are exposed. Another layer of stress was added by England's packed domestic schedule, especially in the winter when league, cup, European and international obligations can leave little time between games. Numerous serious injuries disrupted Kane's career, keeping him off the field at crucial points in Tottenham's growth. Music. He turned his right ankle during a challenge against Sunderland in September 2016, causing damage to the ligaments. He was just beginning to establish himself as one of the Premier League's most dependable goal scorers when the injury kept him out of competition. His momentum would be halted by an ankle issue in the future. He suffered an ankle ligament injury during Tottenham's Champions League quarter-final match against Manchester City in April 2019, which sparked a well-reported race to recuperate before the final against Liverpool. Kane eventually made a comeback to start for Madrid, but Tottenham lost 2-0, raising concerns about his fitness in addition to the overall disappointment of the outcome. He sustained a severe injury to his left hamstring against Southampton on New Year's Day in 2020. He was sidelined for several months due to the damage, which necessitated surgery. It is not appropriate to utilize these setbacks to assess his current state or assert that he suffers from a specific level of chronic pain. His medical evaluation, surgery, recuperation, and the uncertainty of waiting to find out whether his body would allow him to compete again were all significant times in his career, according to the public record. Seldom does rehabilitation provide the instant gratification of winning a game or scoring a goal. Smaller steps, regaining strength, regaining movement, stepping up running intensity, and progressively resuming training with teammates are used to gauge progress. Kane went through those procedures multiple times, coming back not only to take part but also to continue meeting the required scoring levels. Music, meanwhile, his football continued to advance beyond the conventional duties of a striker in the penalty area. Music. As he grew more at ease, he started to move away from the defensive line, catch the ball in deeper spots, and use his passing range to unleash runners who were getting past him. Age or damage compensation is not the only explanation for that evolution. It also demonstrated his tactical acumen, his manager's methods, and his awareness of how he might affect a game even if he wasn't making the winning shot. The most obvious example was his collaboration with Son Heung-min. Under pressure, Kane might pull a center defender forward, pivot, and throw a pass into the opening made behind the defensive line. Music, changing from the player who was supposed to complete an attack to the guy who may start it. As a result, the injuries are only one aspect of the narrative. They disrupted seasons, brought about challenging times of uncertainty, music, and continually insisted that Kane re-establish faith in previously instinctive motions. They did not, however, stop him from improving. He continued to be a top scorer throughout his late 20s and early 30s, but he also developed into a better all-around creator who could affect play from multiple angles on the field. That combination shows something deeper than the straightforward assertion that he overcame football's physical repercussions. No athlete completely avoids time, collision, or injury. Kane's accomplishment was his capacity to keep learning as those realities piled up around him. The pace and finishing instincts that had initially made him famous were not the only things he relied on. His better placement, passing, music anticipation, and spatial awareness made it possible for intelligence to do an increasing amount of the work. The body needed to heal. The football mentality kept expanding. Together, those two facts clarify how a striker who was frequently sidelined by severe injuries could recover, adjust, and continue to be effective well into a career already characterized by thousands of taxing minutes for both club and nation. The paradox that had followed Harry Kane throughout English football appeared to continue during his first season in Germany. He shattered individual records, scored easily, and swiftly adjusted to a new league. However, in 2024, Bayern Munich lost the Bundesliga to an undefeated Bayer Leverkusen team. The outcome brought back the well-known jokes, as if a single striker had a curse strong enough to account for a whole team's shortcomings. Kane did not respond by disputing each critic. He came back for a second season, carrying on with the work that had propelled him from Ridgeway Rovers to the pinnacle of European football. Under Vincent's leadership, Bayern regained their stability, and a draw with Bayer Leverkusen on May 4, 2025, mathematically sealed the Munich team's Bundesliga title. Without a significant team trophy, Kane was no longer the best current attacker. However, the confirmation was first received outside of the actual ceremony. Music. 6 days later, the significance materialized. In their last home game of the season, Bayern defeated Borussia Mönchengladbach 2-0, with Kane scoring the first goal. The Allianz Arena was still packed when the title presentation started following the final whistle. The first honor of hoisting the Meisterschale went to Thomas Müller, who was making his last home appearance for the team. The English striker, who had spent so many years passing past trophies won by someone else, was the last member of the team to receive the silver plate. Music. Kane lifted it above his head, grinned at the spectators, and let teammates cover him in the customary celebration of wheat beer. Music. There was no waiting penalty shootout to change the outcome. There was no music, no tunnel that Kane had to pass through to prevent another celebration, and no opposing captain getting ready to lift the trophy. At last he had the trophy. Music. He talked about the aims as well as the effort and sacrifice needed to celebrate a shared victory, describing the sensation as worth the wait. That distinction was important. Golden Boots had attested to his superiority as a person. The Meisterschale attested to the fact that his brilliance had at last been present among a winning squad. However, Kane did not use the championship as an excuse to slow down. He saw it as the start of a new norm. Bayern had reclaimed the league title, but the following campaign would determine if the first trophy marked the conclusion of a tale or the beginning of a more challenging one. The 2025-2026 season turned out to be Kane's most successful. He made 51 appearances in all competitions at the age of 32, scoring 61 goals, including 36 in the Bundesliga. In February, he surpassed 500 senior goals for club and country, won another European Golden Shoe, and finished as the... He had missed a penalty that may have kept England in the World Cup in Qatar years prior, sending it over the crossbar. In Berlin, Music finished a final in which he scored every goal with another penalty. It is not appropriate to see the two exchanges as flawless. Together, they demonstrated the gap between public failure and the readiness to endure another decisive kick, even though one could never completely erase the other. Music. Before golden confetti fell over the stadium, Kane and his teammates sprinted toward the Bayern fans as the final whistle blew. It was one of the best nights of his career, according to him. Making the squad and the supporters proud had been his goal. The domestic double was achieved with 3 goals in the second half. Once characterized by empty gaps in his trophy music cabinet, the striker now held league titles, a German Cup, 61 goals in a single season, and a match ball from a final that he nearly decided on his own. Kane traveled from Berlin to North America for the 2026 World Cup throughout the summer. With their captain once more holding the most scrutinized spot in the team, England made it through the competition. He helped the squad advance to a semi-final matchup with Argentina in Atlanta by scoring 6 goals. England had a lead in the second half but was unable to maintain it, losing 2-1 Munich and giving up another chance to advance to the World Cup final. Kane did not hide his disappointment. After the effort needed to make it to the Final Four, he expressed his devastation for the players, staff, and fans. The loss served as another reminder that international football could still cause him the same agony even after club trophies had altered the public perception of him. However, England still had one game left. Thomas Tuchel switched up his squad for the bronze medal match against France, and Declan Rice took Kane's spot as captain. The muted consolation match that many had anticipated did not transpire. In the first half, England scored 4 goals. After the break, France rallied, and the match became into a 10-goal match before England won 6-4. Bukayo Saka finished a hat-trick. Jude Bellingham scored England's 6th goal, and the team finished 3rd. This was the country's best World Cup result since 1966, and Music's best result outside of England. The competition did not answer all of the questions surrounding England's desire for another world crown, and Kane was awarded a bronze medal instead of the trophy he had long sought, Music. It did, however, put an end to a time when it was getting harder to maintain the previous perception of him as a player who would never succeed. In less than a year, he produced the Music most prolific season of his life, lifted the Bundesliga trophy, finished a domestic double with a hat-trick in a cup final, scored more than 500 goals in his career, and helped England return from another semi-final loss with its best World Cup placement in 60 years. None of those successes altered the starting point of the voyage. Before Munich, Berlin, and North America, there was a little kid who had been let go by Arsenal and a father who refused to let the rejection get in the way of the next project. Pat Kane did not assure his kid that he would win every final. When it didn't, he offered him a way to proceed. The instructions still covered the entire career more than 20 years later, despite goals, injuries, missed penalties, lost finals, and medals. So let's get started.